Hello and welcome to the channel. Today what we're going to talk about is sending @mentions when posting Microsoft Teams messages using Power Automate. Let's go. Let's talk a little bit about why this is important. So naturally people have no shortage of information that's being sent to them every day, whether it's email, text messages, social media messages, and of course your instant messaging through Microsoft Teams. And I'm sure, much like myself, you also deal with this where you have a tremendous amount of information that is heading your way, and naturally there are circumstances where you do want to elevate essentially the priority of that message, and one of the ways you can do that is by using an @mention. So I'm sure that you've used this in Microsoft Teams manually when you're trying to get the attention of a colleague. I'm sure you've probably used it in Outlook as well, but what we're going to talk about today is how we can actually go ahead and do the same thing of sending @mentions through automation, and more specifically the Microsoft Teams connector for Power Automate. Now, in order to get this to work, you can't just @mention someone directly inside a Teams action that's going to post a message. We do need to go ahead and use another action a step before that, and that is called get @mention token for user. Once we have that output, we can then go ahead and slide it into the payload to actually post that message itself. Before we dive deeper into the content, I wanted to let you know about an emerging community found at serverlessnotes.com. This is a community resource that covers best practices, tips, and latest announcements built on contributions by technology enthusiasts from around the globe. On serverlessnotes.com, you'll find content related to Power Automate, Azure Logic Apps, Azure Service Bus, Azure Functions, and much, much more. Serverlessnotes.com is brought to you by Serverless 360, a portal that is focused on operations and support for Microsoft Azure serverless resources. Now, this is a complementary tool to the Azure portal, and it helps organizations in supporting Azure serverless applications. You can find out more about Serverless 360 at serverless360.com. All right, so this is that action that I was talking about on the previous slide around constructing a specific payload that allows us to include an @mention. And so how we use this action is we provide the email address of the person that we are looking to send the @mention to. And then what you're going to see is when you go into the run history, what actually is outputted is we see these tags. It's essentially some XML tag that'll say @ and then the email address itself. Now, once we have this output, we can go ahead and send it or include it when posting a message to Microsoft Teams. Now, there's a variety of different actions that can be used to post messages to both Teams and to channels. And just for the sake of this demo, I've chosen to use the post a message as the flow bot to a channel. And so in this case, the whole channel will see this specific message, but what's different is we're going to go ahead and include an @mention for the person that we're really trying to get their awareness of, and then we'll include that. And so you'll see that when I go ahead and run the demo, just exactly how this works. Now, one thing I did want to just call out in case you're interested, what happens if you go ahead and just copy this @tag and you have the closing tag and you want to include that directly in the payload? That actually will work as well, but certainly with Microsoft Power Automate being a democratized service that's targeting a whole wide variety of users, this was essentially the simplest, most user-friendly to go ahead and to construct that. So with all of that said, let's go ahead and let's see a demo of this in action. Now, to make this work, we need a trigger naturally, and the trigger is completely arbitrary in this specific example. Here I'm going to use manually trigger a flow, but I also have another scenario which I'm going to use in a future video around Power Virtual Agents and fallback topics where we can go ahead and include this as well. So once again, you're going to need a trigger, completely arbitrary. Manually trigger a flow is the simplest way to get this kicked off. So as I mentioned before, here's the action, the get @mention token for a user, provide the email address, and then what we can go ahead and do is we're going to see that as dynamic content that we can go ahead and include in our configuration here. So let's go ahead, let's click on save, and then let's go ahead and let's run this. Okay, so it's running. Now we've got a push notification here. And also if we head over to Teams in our activity feed, you saw that that was essentially lit up because what's happened is someone has now mentioned me. It's 1:16 p.m., 1:16 p.m. over here. And if we go ahead and click on this, we're going to then go ahead and see that we have been called out, right? My name is in red and bold, and then we have the message as well. Now this is provided by the Flowbot itself, so that's why we're seeing this specific message itself. Now, if we head over to Teams, we head over to our project, right? Here is the channel that we wanted to post to, and then sure enough, we do see the message here with my name highlighted. So this is an example, and we can also see the @ sign over here as well. So this would be an example of everyone being able to see this message, but for me, I get an indicator knowing that it's for me, and then I can go ahead and see, very clearly that someone's trying to get my attention. Now, as I mentioned before, we do have this notion of this payload that needs to be included. What happens if we just go ahead and head over here? Let's get rid of the original one, and then let's put the payload now at the back end of this. And just, just for giggles, let's just go ahead and delete this altogether, right? Let's see what happens now. Let's go ahead and let's test. Sure enough, there's our push notification. Let's head over to Teams. There we go. I've been mentioned here. It shows up in my activity feed. And then sure enough, if we head over to Teams into the channel, once again, we do have the message. So either approach will work for you. Naturally, using the out-of-box approach is probably the safest, just in case there ever was changes. You'd be abstracted from that because that connector, that action would always return the correct payload for you to be able to use. But I just thought that was interesting and worth showing. So that concludes today's video. Hope you enjoyed that. I'm sure you will find this useful. Naturally, @mentions is a great feature inside of Microsoft Teams. And why would it be any different if you're trying to get a hold of someone through automation? All right, so thanks for checking out another episode on the channel itself. If you're not following me on Twitter, I would encourage you to do so @Weare. You're naturally watching this on YouTube. Appreciate all of the support you folks have given me. Always like those likes, and go ahead and subscribe if you don't want to miss any future edition of my content. I do post every week on Power Platform. All right, so thanks and take care.